the structures in society that have been in place to create real connections for men don't exist. Very few men out there have those models that help them see, oh, this is what it really means to be a fully whole man. We don't have any space where we can actually be open and honest about our feelings and the things that we're going through. Hey, Beatrice, such a pleasure and an honor to be here.
So if you guys don't remember, I actually had Kelly and his wife, Emily, who I adore, on a couple episodes ago or last season. And in that episode, I was like, I really need to have Kelly on so we can kind of dive a little bit more into men's work and men's struggles. So today's episode is going to be much more around that. So I'm really glad to have you here and to kind of get into this topic a little bit deeper. We've touched on it on this podcast. I've had a lot of guys on that have shared their story and their journey, which has been amazing. But I really wanted to kind of get your perspective and kind of just what we're seeing in the landscape of men's struggles today.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here and such a great topic that I love to talk about because
Yeah.
it is near and dear to my heart. I've been working with men for over a decade in this container. I currently work with Gerard Adams and Leaders Create Leaders as
Mm.
an embodied leadership coach. I also do communications consulting and get to work with my wife, who we both adore,
Oh,
and
love
doing
her.
working with couples and supporting communication struggles and challenges to really embody the people that we want to be in our relationships.
Yeah, yeah. I look up to you too so much. I love your journey. I love your story. If you guys haven't listened to the episode, I'll drop it in the show notes so you guys can listen to their episode and their story. They're incredible humans. So very honored to have you both have had you both on individually and together. And you two just launched a podcast also. Tell me a
That's
little bit more about
right.
that.
Yeah, love and practice. And so we are opening up our journey, both individually and
Mhm.
together, and what it looks like to really create the lasting relationship that we want to have in real time, because we're still in it. You know, we're only
Yeah.
2 years in. My wife's going to get mad at me because I can't get dates right, but 2 years in, somewhere around there. And we met on her podcast, and we're already in the work and started working together and have been working with couples for the last year and a half. So we're kind of pulling back the curtain on what it's like through our individual challenges that we're facing, along with the practices that we use with couples to help them and support them on the journey that they're creating.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you guys take such a real approach, and I think we just need so much more of that. And just your vulnerability and opening up those doors into your marriage,
Thank you.
and because
You know,
even oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's actually been rather therapeutic, to be quite honest. We were a little
Mm.
scared about opening it up, but honestly, there have been moments in the podcast where we're just, looking, go, wow, we actually hadn't talked about that, and I'm really glad we have. So it's been
I
great.
love it. I love it. So, like in real time, you guys are working through kind of relational issues, and I think it's beautiful, and that's why I did the marriage series too, is just to show the realness of relationship and marriage, and even when it's right and it's with the right person, um, there's so much more that's still required, right? You're still going to go through
Absolutely,
the hard things. It's just how you go through the hard things that really matter.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah,
love that for you guys. I'm totally championing you guys on, and to anyone as well, we'll drop that podcast here as well in the show notes because they're just a wealth of knowledge and you guys should go listen to it if you're
oh,
interested in
thank you.
relational work.
Such an honor.
Yeah. So, but today, what I really want to kind of pick your brain on and you just create a space to talk about this, especially I'm a female podcaster, but I really want to make sure I'm creating space for both struggles, right? Men and
Mhm,
women's struggles
mhm.
in this. And so I want to know from kind of your perspective, when you kind of look at today's landscape for men, um, what do you feel like when it comes to like mental health, their connection to relationships, to women, their identity? What do you think is at the core of why so many men are struggling? Because I see it. I get DMs, if for my coaching business, I get a lot of men that reach out
Yeah.
and they're struggling and it's really sad. It's hard to see, it's hard to watch. And so yeah, from your perspective, what do you feel like is really at the core
Yeah,
of that?
if I could boil it down to one word, I'd say it's isolation. Whether they're
Mm,
aware of it or not, it really comes down to that, the modern man, we find ourselves more isolated than perhaps at any time. And y- the structures in society that have been in place to create real connections for men don't exist.
mm,
And there's a lack of mentorship. There's a lack of men that we can look up to, and so there's really been a epidemic of boys raising boys, and then separating as we grow into adulthood, and then finding ourselves alone and really following this myth of the self-made man, that
mm,
in order to be a high achiever in today's society, we really need to be able to make it on our own. And that's a myth that's lasted for a very long time, but I think it's really very prevalent throughout society today, and with decreased isolation that we experience through this highly technical world. There's just
mhm,
fewer and fewer spaces for men to gather, and then we feel we have to do it by ourselves, and we're continuing to receive messages online and out there in the virtual space that reiterate that idea that a real man is a man who's done it by himself. And
mhm.
in that space, we create greater and greater isolation. And I think that to me is the core of the issue.
Yeah. I think that's something that, just the feedback that I get from men is they also feel like they just are never gonna be enough.
Mm,
And it's this feeling of, at least just from what I've seen, like they're like the goalpost keeps moving for them and they just feel like I'm never going to be enough. I'm never going to achieve these things. I'm not going to be the 6 foot finance guy, and I think so much of social media has painted this picture. And maybe this is also from my perspective, just from coming from the dating world and the relational world.
yeah.
Um, but I don't know if that's something that you see also. Like, not only is it loneliness, but it's like loneliness in also not feeling like they're enough or they're ever going to be able to achieve.
Yeah, I think so much of these things are going to go back to our childhood and how we're raised.
Mhm.
And I think in my practice, more often than not, I'm working with the inner child than I am
Mm.
working with the mature adult. And our lack of
Yeah.
ability to step into true adulthood because our lives are being run by the adaptive version of our inner
Mhm.
child that is actually running the show. And so really, when I think about these things, most of them go back to age 11, 12, 13. And these are middle school issues that are so unattained in our development
Mhm.
as young men. And so one of the most important things that we need to do in that early stage is to create a sense of self that is acceptable to me and acceptable to my community.
Mhm.
That in
Yeah.
and of itself is where I think where most of us end up going off the rails, is this idea that I can find a version of me that is acceptable to the community around me. And what
Mm.
ends up happening is I search for the version of me that is acceptable to the community around me and never find the one that's also acceptable to me. So I'm living my life
Mhm.
for the people around me, living my life for the people that that are within my direct community. And how often is that direct community that we're raised into actually the community that I would call my soul family, the people that I actually really want to be around, the people that I really feel a sense of camaraderie and likeness around. It's just my proximity. And so at that early stage, I learned to try to be somebody other than I am in order to fit in with the space or place that I'm
Mhm.
actually in. I did a documentary, gosh, it's been about a decade ago now, where I was inside maximum security, super maximum security prison, Pelican Bay,
Mm.
and interviewing the men who were in lockup and had been in lockup for 20, 30 years, some of them in isolation, the highest level of imprisonment. And the number one story that I heard from these men was a story about at 11, 12 years old, they took the wrong path. They tried to
Mm.
join this other group of people. They tried to fit in, and that was the gang. That was this other, this seedy community, and that spiraled into an identity that is something that they're in lockup for the majority of their life around. And I think this kind of identity is so
Mm.
prevalent, where we're trying to be somebody we're not for somebody else, and then we
Mm.
continue down road through our late adolescence and into adulthood.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. So it's like you're essentially you're abandoning who you really are you may not even know who you really are because you haven't even allowed yourself to explore that. And then you put yourself in situations with people that you probably wouldn't even want to hang out with had you known who you really are.
Yeah, and that's I mean, and this is, very similar for women as well. But
Mhm.
what happens is the social communities that we have, as young men, they tend to dissipate as we move into early
Mm,
adulthood. Men don't have collective communities. We have
mm,
sports, we have games, we have things that we do, and that's generally forms our first sense of collective camaraderie. Maybe we got into a fraternity when we were in college or something along those lines. But then we tend to gravitate to the people that we work around. Men don't naturally gravitate
mhm,
towards having social community.
mm.
And if we
Yeah.
find ourselves in relationship, typically what happens is we end up in social community with the friends of our partner's friends.
Mhm.
And then when
Yeah.
we fall out of that relationship, then we no longer have a friend group. Right?
Yeah.
We have some guys that we might go to the game with or we might go drinking with, but we don't have any space where we can actually be open and honest about our feelings and the things that we're going through. Women tend to
Yeah.
naturally gravitate towards that. You create community. You create a space where you can talk about
Mhm.
what's alive, what's present on your heart, where you can talk about your feelings. There aren't spaces that have been created in the broader sense of culture for men to do that. And that's why, for me, men's groups are so incredibly important.
Mm.
And that's why I've been doing that work for a very long time, is to create spaces where men can really be real. And in that space of being real, we can see the reflection of all of the things that are showing up in our lives that are ineffective. In those
Yeah.
other communities that we're living in, we're constantly doing the same thing that we've been doing since middle school, which is trying to be somebody that we're not in order to feel accepted.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And oftentimes in those environments too, like let's say the guys you go to the game with, the bar, like you're not having deep conversations. Like you don't actually really know them.
Mhm.
I feel like in those environments, it's just people to hang out with. It's not necessarily, deep conversations or feeling known in that, and it makes sense. It's like you can be around people and still feel totally completely alone.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and it goes back to, listen, sometimes these are people that I've grown up with. Sometimes people I've known
Hmm.
since I was in second, third grade. I still have friends that I know from second and third grade, that I
Hmm.
still see, and I'm almost 50 years old. But, I remember I got together with them around Christmas a couple years ago, and we were sitting around chatting and having a good time, having a good laugh. And they started asking me about these men's groups, and I was telling them a little bit about the men's groups and the work that we do, and gave them a kind of a taste of the vulnerability that I share in these men's groups. And after I shared something vulnerable, I looked at them and I just went, "This wasn't the right place to share that, was it?" And they looked at me, they're like, "No, man, we're gonna kill you about that one." It was just like, "Yep, these are my old buddies," like, "I love you guys, but, like, yeah, you're not gonna hold that. You're not gonna be able to hold the sensitivity around what's really alive for me in this stage and age. You're gonna you're
Yeah.
gonna rib me about it. You're gonna give me a hard time about it."
Hmm.
And we've gotten a little bit better. I mean, we're old at this point,
Yeah.
but still, those patterns run deep. Those patterns of
Yeah.
what we've been playing out, since we were little boys, and when we get
Yeah.
together, we still show up as little boys. And when we get together with our old friends,
Mhm.
sometimes we can be really vulnerable, but also there's a need to diffuse those feelings, to put them to the side, to kind of make everything okay, rather than really having the skills to go deeper and to look at what's really alive.
Yeah, no, I see the repercussions of that when it comes to relationships and what women are kind of requiring in that.
Mhm.
And what do you feel like are vital, like emotional skills that men right now don't have and are not being taught?
Mhm. Yeah, there's a lot of them, and I think my generation, we were raised by our mothers, and
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
we didn't have mentorship. We didn't have men to look up to, and so
Mhm.
there's a whole range of things that move from, um, excuse me, from emotional vulnerability and emotional agility, emotional uh, communication, ability to just communicate my feelings and be able to
Mhm.
talk about those. But honestly, one of the biggest things that I address in men's group is just integrity.
Mhm.
really being an integrated man, to say what I do what I say, to recognize that all of the places where I'm out of alignment with who I say I'm going to be have an
Mhm.
effect on everyone around me, because I
Mhm.
haven't seen that. I haven't seen that
Yeah.
modeled for me. Very few men out there have those models that help them see, oh, this is what it really means to be a fully whole man.
Mhm.
And so, y- you know, it's a broad range of what men are lacking in terms of both their ability to open up their heart, but
Mhm.
also their ability to just be their word.
Yeah.
Two things, kind of, polar opposites, but also they're constantly impacting how others experience us as men.
Yeah. And, why do you think that's so? What has led to the lack of integrity in
Mhm,
men?
mm,
Because it's a complaint I hear a lot from women,
mhm,
especially in the dating world. They're, like, kinda apathetic, they're like, "Yeah, I'll call you," they don't really call, like, there's just this, like, I don't wanna say laziness, it's the only word that's coming to my mind right now, but
mhm.
this yeah, it's apathetic, it's like they're like, and it's a complaint I hear a lot, and I wonder what has kinda led to that? Because I think that's a little bit different than, men struggle with loneliness and other things. It's like, where did that get lost, I think, in as men mature and grow?
Well, I think that there isn't a value for speaking the truth.
Mm. Mm.
It's so much easier to just say, yeah, I don't know, than to say this isn't going to work for me.
Mhm.
It's so much easier to get away with that, and our society generally doesn't correct that behavior.
Mhm.
The way that dating works today, dating apps, it's like there's no accountability. And
Yeah.
through a digital culture, we as numbers increase, responsibility decreases. And so
Mhm.
as we have greater sense of anonymity, as we live in
Yeah.
larger communities, and I live now in Asheville, North Carolina, right?
Mhm.
Smallest community I've ever lived in my entire life. And it's really interesting to see how different things are in a small community
Mhm.
versus a living in Los Angeles for 20 years.
Mhm.
I had, somebody sleeping outside of my steps almost every other night in Venice Beach.
Mhm.
That just was normal, and I didn't have any responsibility for that. But here in Asheville, if I see somebody walking down the street or is homeless, I'm thinking that's somebody that is probably related to somebody around here. There's
Mm.
somebody I know as a neighbor that I'm connected to is probably being
Yeah.
affected by that, and so I take a personal responsibility. And so in this in this greater, larger community, there's a diffusion of responsibility. So
Mhm.
there's no reason for me to say, "Hey, listen, I don't like that behavior, and I'm choosing not to show up because
Mm.
you showed up this way, or this doesn't feel right for me, or this doesn't feel aligned for me." There's no direct responsibility for that. So it's much easier to just say, "Yeah, I don't know, we'll see."
Mhm.
When I lived in LA, you used to always say that, "Let's do lunch," was another way of saying, "I'll never see you again."
Oh, and now it's like, "We should hang out."
Yeah, exactly. "We should hang out."
Yeah. It's like, I'm never gonna see you. Anytime anyone says that, I'm like, "I'm never gonna see you again. It's fine."
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
where did we lose the ability to say, I would really love to spend time with you, but in order for me to spend time, I'd really like to feel like there's a deeper depth of our conversations.
Mhm.
That's something that I would make time for, and that's something that I would show up for.
Yeah.
Now, why don't we
Gosh.
say that?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a part of it's we're a little more cowardly. We don't wanna face rejection.
There's a fear of reprisal, right?
Mhm.
We'll either be rejected, or, as a man, man, one of the most difficult things I can do is reject a woman.
Mhm.
Hell hath no scorn like a woman rejected.
Mhm.
And what
Yeah.
will that lead to in the broader sense of culture? Where will she go, and what will she say about me? What will she
Mhm.
say online about me? I love watching those gym videos where it's like, the woman goes off, it's like, "You were looking at me in my gym video," and it's like, "I was just walking by, dude.
Yeah.
Chill, chill out."
Yeah.
And I think that there's kind of a general fear that men have around what's the reprisal going to be if I'm actually honest and truthful. And we
Mm,
see that directly in relationship as well. It's easier just to say nothing than to risk the
mhm.
reprisal. And this is, the epidemic of what I call the nice guy, where
Yeah.
where we have this and we can talk a little bit more about this dynamic of
Mhm.
it's kind of the we have the polar opposites of the nice guy and the narcissist, right? And those
Yep.
terms get overused. I want to be really clear
Yeah.
about what the narcissist, we all have a narcissist in us. We all have a
Mhm.
nice guy inside of us, but the polarity between these two behaviors that are both rooted in shame, they're both
Mm,
rooted in this feeling that I'm not enough, and out of that I'm not enoughness, I'm going to act out. And so, the nice guy says, well, I don't really feel like I'm being chosen. I don't really feel like I'm
mhm,
worthy. I don't feel like I'm enough. And so I'm going to do every single thing that I can to become accepted by doing
mm,
everything that I think you might want without you even asking for it.
mm,
Right. And in that, I've become a caretaker. I
mhm.
I provide for you, and as long as I'm providing for you, you can't leave me. You can't let me go. I have a space,
Yeah.
and I won't be abandoned, right? So I present this space of value, and
Mhm.
then we also the dark side of the nice guy is, as soon as he feels taken advantage of, which he ultimately always
Y
will,
Yep.
he lashes out. He becomes aggressive.
Mhm.
Becomes, all of the pent up rage that he's
Yeah.
afraid of addressing, it comes out,
Mhm.
and then
Yeah.
yeah. I'm sure you've had some experiences with this, and I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yes. We actually No More Mr. Nice Guy, the book, I'm
Mhm.
sure you are aware of it. Great book.
Yeah.
I'm blanking on the author's name right now, but,
Okay.
he talks through this entire thing, and I actually had, a guy friend of mine, I was telling him about a relationship I had, and I was like, I don't know why, I just didn't work. I just didn't, I was like explaining to him what was going on. And he goes, No More Mr. Nice Guy, you got to read the book. And I was like, what? So I read the book. This was maybe like 2 years ago. And I was like, this makes so much sense.
Mhm.
And I hear it. Like I had a girlfriend over last night for dinner and she's like, he's just so nice. I just am not attracted to him or I just don't like him or I just, and I've actually had some guy friends read that book and we're like, I'm this guy.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting because it actually is really unattractive to many women.
Mhm.
It's either really dominant women that like that because they get to be in the dominant seat and they like the control of it, but ultimately they still don't respect the guy, or there's someone who's in the relationship with them and they're just like, what, something's off. I don't feel attracted to this person, and I'm not, he's doing all the things that I should like, but I don't feel attraction there. And so it's an interesting dynamic because men don't understand what's going on. They're like, but I'm doing all the things. I'm being nice. I'm all that. Like why doesn't she like me? Or why am I not getting the thing that I really want?
Yeah.
You know?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's because it's self-abandoning and it's also a little bit selfish. And I think it puts a lot of pressure on the partner when you're like that because you can feel it. It doesn't feel genuine. And
Mhm.
I think that's what the misconception with the Mr. Nice Guy is, that it's actually selfish because a lot of the things you're doing is to get, even though you don't realize that that's what's happening underneath the surface.
Mhm.
And again, that's when the resentment builds up and the anger comes out because they don't know how to process their emotions. They really only know a few,
Mhm.
and they suppress a lot of it and it'll come out in some random time where it's really inappropriate and suddenly they're frustrated or angry or
Mhm.
and yeah, it's an unfortunate dynamic that I think is happening a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, at the root of that is generally, in my experience, the men that I work with is generally a man who has developed a hyper awareness of others' needs in order to receive
Mhm.
love.
Yep.
That's where he grew up. He grew up in a
Yeah.
world where, um, you know, eh, things were not necessarily, love was not easy to receive. And
Mhm.
so I learned, and oftentimes with my mother, with other women, I learned
Mhm.
if I was hyper aware of what you needed, then I would receive the love that I desired.
Mhm.
So that pattern, again, going back, it's generally the little
Mhm.
boy is still playing out today,
Yeah.
as an adult who has seen that works, that gives
Mhm.
me the love that I desire. And if it's not working, I just lean on it
Mhm.
a little bit more, and ultimately it will. But ultimately, we're all just seeking love. It's it. At
Yeah.
the end of the
Yeah,
day,
and
it's just a pattern
yeah.
we've created.
Yeah, and we fear the abandonment of it,
Mhm,
like, once we have it, whether, whatever side you're on, and it's what drives a lot of the behavior. I
mhm,
I remember I was in a relationship a couple years ago, and I will never forget him saying this, but, I was kind of like, I don't even know. I was telling him I didn't even know how to be there for him because he's never really tells me, like, what works for you? What do you need? What are your needs? Like, I
mhm,
feel like I never really knew how to meet them because I didn't really know what they were.
mhm.
And I had told him that, and his response was, "But my needs don't matter."
Yeah, yeah.
And I just was, like, heartbroken that I was like, "Who told you that? What do you mean your needs don't matter? Like, this is an equal partnership. Like, you matter in this, you know?" And
I'm
it just couldn't he didn't understand what I was saying.
At least he could even acknowledge that he had needs. Like, I can't tell you how many men I speak with that can't even acknowledge that they have needs. "What are you talking
Mhm.
about? I don't really need anything. Like, I'll
Mhm.
figure it out. I'll make it work." I don't, I've been in that place, what do you need in a relationship? A lack of fighting? More sex,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Like, what else do I need? I don't know. I'll take care of all of my own needs.
Mhm. Yep.
So what do I what are we talking about here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so when you say my needs don't matter, that's just the next level of saying, yeah, well, look, I have them, but nobody else is going to meet them other than me. So why are we having this conversation?
Mm.
Because nobody ever has,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, that's so heartbreaking to think about, like, that's how men are some men, I'm not gonna say everyone, but are walking around, and I think this goes back to where we started at the beginning of this episode, was that feeling of loneliness. I think it's inherent even in the relation even, like, in relationship, you
Mhm.
know, feeling like they still have to bear everything, and they're still solo, and I don't have needs, or what are needs? What are you talking about? Like,
Yeah,
that just kind of reiterates that. I think it paints the picture that loneliness isn't just, "Oh, I don't have friends to talk to," but I think it's this isolation within themselves too. It's not just because they could be in a group of people and still feel incredibly alone.
absolutely, absolutely. I went through this very recently with a family member who was considering suicide, um,
Ugh.
uh, and he was sitting on the bridge, really really thinking about whether this was going to be it. And he had friends. He has friends. He has me. And it was probably one of the lowest moments of my life of realizing all the work that I do out there, and I can't do this for somebody
Mm,
that means so much to me because I didn't know. And at the end of the day, it was really just about his inability he's a father, uh,
mhm,
and he wasn't he'd run into some bad times financially, and didn't want to ask anybody for help.
mm,
Didn't want to be a burden. That's the big one. I don't want to be a burden to anyone else.
mm.
If I'm a burden, then I'm not a man. To be a man means that I take the burden of everybody
Yeah.
else. And so if I'm a burden to someone else, I'm not even a man. So what's the point of me being here?
Mm,
And so from that, he just said, you know what? I'm done. Maybe my kids are even better off without me because what kind of example am I setting? And that's heartbreaking. you know
so heartbreaking.
I wanted to punch him in the face. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I didn't even get the phone call. I didn't even get an opportunity to help you out. And he was like,
Yeah.
I didn't want to be, man. I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden. I love you. I love you,
Yeah.
but that is so difficult because that's what we are socialized to believe, that to be a man
Mhm.
means that I carry everybody else's burden. And if I'm a burden to everyone else, then I'm less of a man.
Mm. Oh, that's so heartbreaking, and I didn't know this for a long time, but I looked this up a couple of days ago too. 80% of suicide are men. 80% in the US. I think it was like 79 point something, but that is Like, if that's not alarming and a cry for help, I don't know what is,
Yeah,
you know? And it's these ideas that I think that society in general has instilled in men, that it's so sad to hear someone like this who has a beautiful family and from the outside should have everything that they would essentially want, and yet still they carry all this. Is it shame? Does that come from shame? Like, I don't want to be a burden to somebody. I don't want to feel that shame that I need help, because to
absolutely.
need help is to mean I'm weak.
Yeah, yeah. There's a great
You
quote.
know.
It's not the weight of the load that breaks a man down, but how he carries it.
Mm,
And that's the truth. It's there. We carry enormous amount of weight as men. It's self-proclaimed. We choose it.
mhm,
It's something that gives us a great sense of purpose, of value.
mhm,
Carrying heavy weight. I mean, you know, every dude's in the gym working out, just because just for fun. It's the first thing I do in the
mhm,
morning because it's fun because I want to carry a weight. I want to carry a weight. It feels when I carry that weight, I feel like I've accomplished something. Is
yeah.
literally what we believe is a core sense of purpose. So if we're not out there doing that, if we're not fulfilling a purpose, we're not providing a value, we're not carrying a weight, then we have zero value in this world.
Mm.
That is core identity of being a man in society today. If I don't have purpose, if I don't carry a load, if I don't carry it for others and create something of value and of purpose, then I'm worthless.
Oh, that's so heartbreaking, just to even, like, just sit with that. Like, to feel, I mean, it's overwhelming
Mm-hmm.
to feel that way. I can't imagine carrying that, and feeling like I don't have someone to turn to, and I don't have even a 2 friends, 1, 2 friends that I can go to. But sometimes these men do, and they still don't want to. Like you said, it's so wrapped up in not wanting to open up or not wanting to be a burden and all that. So that's just, yeah, it's incredibly devastating.
Yeah, I mean, look, weakness, it's biological.
Mhm.
If I'm weak, I'm not a man,
Mhm.
period. If I'm weak, I'm not attractive. If I'm weak, I'm not desired. If I'm
Mhm.
weak, I can't provide. If I'm weak, I can't be a part of. So I will do everything that's in my power to convince
Mhm.
myself and to convince the people that are around me, again, trying to fit into this community, that
Yeah.
I'm strong. And the thing that
Mhm.
men fundamentally miss is that one of the greatest strengths that we have is our vulnerability.
Yeah.
That is so hard for us to grasp. That when we can actually, the one of the most difficult things to do is to be open and honest about what I'm not
Mm.
able to do. That's
Yeah.
vulnerable and that's real strength. That requires courage. And courage only
Mhm.
exists through vulnerability. And that is one of the things that is really lacking, is the sense of authentic, true vulnerability that creates strength.
Yeah. And you mentioned, courage. Like, courage is such a strong virtue. Like, it's not weakness. Like, it takes courage. And I think that's like that a big misconception. But I'm curious to dive into, you know, how shame, because I think, Brene Brown is incredible. She talks a lot about this. I've read a couple of her books, and she actually, she changed her perspective on shame in men. That she had a moment where someone came up to her at a book signing, and it was a husband, and he opened her eyes up to that, because he was like, if I'm not on this white shiny horse and
Hmm.
I don't have it all together, my wife and my daughter will not respect me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was like, like, her mind was blown. I think a lot changed for her in that moment, and she wrote this phenomenal book around shame.
Hmm.
And I'm curious for men too. We talked a little bit about how it shows up in some areas, but how does it show up, let's say, in conflict or connection in a relationship, or even how they communicate? Like, how does that unprocessed shame, because I don't think men even recognize that that's a big underlying feeling that's going on, or that's something that's I don't even think that's even on men's radar, that they feel that.
Yeah, we're running from it. We're doing everything that we
Mm,
possibly can to
to
keep
not feel it.
to keep it at bay, to not to if I do these actions, I will not have to feel shame.
Mhm,
Simple. Everything in our lives is a very rational, do this and then you'll have this. Do this and
mhm,
you'll have that. And so, it's, oh, if I don't do this, I will experience shame. And then when I don't do that, when I fall short of it, I experience the shame and then I create numbing behaviors to avoid the shame that I'm actually experiencing. Right. So
mm,
so much of that is prevalent. And that's why pornography is such a prevalent part of our society today because it's a numbing behavior. Um,
mm,
you know,
mhm,
alcohol, drugs, all of this is these are ways of avoiding the experience of what I'm actually going through, the
mhm,
running from this shame that is present. And so, uh, as I'm so busy running from, trying to avoid, trying to get away from it, in my relationship is the one space that I generally feel safe to
mm,
express all of the pent up anger, frustration that is the result of me running from this shame. Men
mm,
tend to express more of the anger than the sadness, right?
mm,
Directing it outward rather than inward because I have not created the container to hold it inward. So I have to project it outward. Right? That's a safer version for men. Oftentimes, women have the opposite experience. I've created a
mhm,
safe container in here, so I'm going to project it in me because I can hold it. Nobody else around me can hold it, but I can hold this, right?
mhm,
So we project it out. And so where do we project it out? We project it out on the people that we love and we care about the most, typically our mothers and our partners.
mm,
They're the
mm,
ones that hear all of they're the ones that get all the projection of the shame that we're running from so that we don't have to experience it. But all the pent up anger, frustration comes out on the people that we love the most because they are the ones that we trust. And
mm,
what we're actually saying, and I want women to really hear this and understand this, is what we're really trying to say is that I am deathly afraid that if you find out who I really am, that you will leave me. So here it is. I'm going to give it to you. My little boy wants to know that he's going to be safe. And this happens in every relationship.
mhm,
Your little girl's going to come out and she's going to act out and because she wants to know that she's safe, right?
mhm,
So I'm going to project my little boy onto you in all of these wrong ways so that my little boy can know whether or not he's going to be safe in this relationship.
mhm,
And if he's not, then I'm going to punish you for it
mhm,
because punishment is the way that I know how to protect myself. That's just one protector. Well, we all have different kinds of protectors. But when you see these kinds of behaviors coming out, what it's really doing is saying, "Ooh, I don't feel safe, so I now need to protect myself."
mhm. And then they wall up, right?
Mhm.
They're less vulnerable, they're less soft,
Mhm.
and then women are like, what's going on? Why are you shutting down?"
Yeah.
You
But
know?
the thing that you really need to know is that these behaviors, whether they're, the neediness, the weakness, or what you were talking about before in terms of we were talking about the nice guy, right? And when
Mm,
women are seeing this guy, doing all these things, and it's like, oh, this feels like he's trying too hard, right?
mhm,
Well, he is trying too hard
mhm,
because his little boy who desperately loves you and cares about you is terrified that you're going to leave him. So
mhm,
he's doing everything that he can to try to hold on to you because he loves you.
mhm,
And what he wants to know is that you'll say, it's okay, you're safe. But we look at those behaviors and go, oh, that's not what I want. I want a strong
mhm,
man. That's not a strong man. So he learns, okay, double down. This is not going to be safe. This is not going to be okay for me to reveal that part of myself. So I'm going to
mhm,
find another layer to cover it up because I won't be accepted. And that's what I
mhm,
think is really difficult for women to really truly understand is they want this version of a man that has it all together, that's
mhm,
emotionally available, that can show up and be. And I'm going to say, I am guilty. I am not. I'm no angel. My wife has had to deal with every version of my little boy coming out and acting out.
mhm.
but
Mhm.
she's been willing to stand in the fire of that and remind me that I'm loved and I'm accepted, and that little
Yeah.
boy dissipates. Even
Yeah.
all the years of work that I've done, he still shows up from time to time.
Absolutely.
We have to be
Yeah.
willing to be there for our partners, to see the ugly sides of them and
Mhm.
say, "Hey, I still accept you even with your ugliness."
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as women too, this is something that I think I've said on the show in the past, but I think we have to be cognizant of what we're asking for. We say we want emotional maturity and emotional availability and all that, but are we actually ready to hold space for that? Because I don't think we understand fully what that's going to look like or what that is, you know? And I think a lot of women struggle with that and don't realize that. Like these are just two random examples I saw recently on the internet. One was Christmas ornaments.
Mm,
I think it was her new husband. She was cleaning the garage. She found Christmas ornaments. And she's like, do we want these? Can we throw them away? And he goes, well, my mother gave me those, and I really don't want to get rid of them. But my ex never let me put them on the tree. She was like, it didn't match, didn't do all that. And this woman had written back, she's like, we as women don't understand how we hurt men, even in such small ways.
mm,
Like, even shutting down the fact that he had these ornaments that he wasn't throwing away, did not want to throw away. They were meaningful to him. But even just being like, no, they're ugly. I don't want them on the tree. They don't, it's like, and it's such a small example, but it's like, it starts with these little things, It's like maybe giving that little boy space to be like, yeah, put them on the tree. Like, it sounds jovial, but it's like, I think those are little moments where it's like, how do we put ourselves aside for a second, recognize that, like, my husband is still a little boy. There's still that little boy in there somewhere, even though he's healed and all of that. How do you honor that a little bit? How do you feed into that a little bit, right?
yeah,
And this woman had been like, I took the ornaments out, we hung them up. I didn't care how ugly they were, and he was like genuinely happy about that.
yeah,
And it's like it's these little moments. But that's like that was probably vulnerable for him to even like kind of say, like, oh yeah, my ex didn't really let me put them on the tree, but I really want to keep them because they're for my mom.
hmm,
It's like and it was this other video I saw recently that was really really sad. This man was looking at a spool of wire,
mm,
and there was not much left. He's like, and then he told his wife came out and he was like, I've had this for like 20 years or like 30 years. He said something about this exact same one. So you can imagine how much wire was on it. And he was like, to look at it and see that there's such little left, he's like, this was my life. 20, like, this is 20 years. Like, he was having this like existential moment of just like couldn't believe, what it stood for. And he was starting to get emotional. And she laughed at him and was like, "Oh," she's like, "Why are you wearing that weird hat?" Like, just totally blew him off. He's
yeah,
like vulnerable and sharing something that was going on for him internally. Maybe he was having a flashback to his past and realizing how much life he lived. And it was just oh, I'm getting emotional about it just because I feel like
mm,
it's so hard for men to be that way. And then for women to not fully understand or to create the space for that is really sad because
mhm,
we're asking this of men. But if we're going to ask of it of men, we also have to be really cognizant of how we actually hold space for that and how we actually hold it.
yeah, yeah. You brought up a really
Because,
good point. Yeah.
yeah.
That safety thing is so critical. What we're really talking about is ultimately we both want safety in our relationships. And I do think it's become a very popular thing in culture right now, and particularly with like the polarity conversation
Mhm.
of what the masculine role is. This is the one that it's like I think this gets completely blown out of perspective. And one of my great friends is kind of one of the leaders in the polarity conversation, but it gets applied to kind of all of our lives, right? And so the masculine is supposed to be the container, the space that's able to hold all of the feminine swirl, right? This is
Mhm.
this is the popular idea, right? So that means that as the feminine, you now get to swirl all of your emotions and everything, and we will create the safe container for that swirl to exist, right?
Mhm.
We will hold it down. And every woman on some level is looking for that. The man that's just like will allow me to just express everything that's alive in me, at every moment, and not be phased by it. Like,
Mhm.
let's be honest. Like, don't you really want that man that will, sit with you as you express all of your emotional, ups and downs, and just stays constant and capable in that? But on the flip side, we forget that we as men also have a feminine as well, and
Mhm.
that we need containment, we need support. And so
Yeah.
it's this idea that's gone, okay, I expect my man to now hold everything, but if he goes off the rail, then he's now not a man. He's
Mhm.
he's less of a man, and then we're right back into the same conversation. I'm not safe. It's expected that in order to be a man, I will create safety for everyone around me.
Mhm.
But when I try to express something that feels vulnerable, that feels, that's my swirl. One of the things that I had in my relationship is we had this conversation about, anger and sadness. You know,
Mhm.
my anger gets to be okay. If your sadness is okay, my anger gets to be okay in this space too. And I understand
Mhm.
that a man's anger can be scary. It can create
Mhm.
a lack of safety. But I think women also don't understand that a woman's sadness creates a lack of safety for us as well. And that
Mhm.
when we experience your sadness, then there's something wrong with us. There's something that we're not doing. There's something that we have failed there. We are a failure in that.
Mhm.
And it often gets turned back on how we are or not showing up in our world. And so both of us are just trying to create safety. And
Mhm.
so it's on each other, unless we're going to be in a relationship with, a masculine and masculine, or feminine and feminine.
Mhm.
As long as we're in the polarity of that dance, we have to find a way to hold and create safety for each other. And so it's not just on our friends and relationship, and our friends and family and community. It's also the way that we're holding each other in relationship that really matters and
Mhm.
creates space for men to feel safe and women to feel safe as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's a dance, like you said. I think we forget that. It's like a balance between the 2. Um, you know, for men that are listening right now, I think who feels lonely and who feels
Mhm.
kind of lost in today's society. Um, because I've like I said, I get a lot of DMs from men who do feel that way. They feel like all the odds are against them. They feel like, they're never going to amount to anything. They feel alone. Um, what do you say to that guy? What hope is there for him?
Oh, I'd say, the first thing is, you're not alone. The number one thing that and men need to experience this. A
Mhm.
lot of the men that I work with are very high achievers, and you would not believe how lonely men feel at the top, quote unquote. Uh,
Mm.
a lot of the men that I work with, they have this core challenge that when things go down, I'm the person that everyone turns to,
Mm.
whether it's the people that work for me, whether it's my family, whether it's I was sharing this with my wife, and almost broke her heart the other day, that I said I've never experienced any time in my life where, if things went south, if things went wrong, I wasn't the person that everybody turned to.
Mm.
Whether I was, my mom was telling a story the other day when we were little, and hurricane came in, and I was probably like 6 years old, and I had put together, I put together all the supplies that we needed in our closet, and had flashlights and a radio and everything, and I was like 6 years old. You know,
Mhm.
I was the person that people turned to. So a lot of the men that I experience, that is the core identity, that,
Mm.
I'm the person that everybody turns to. So there's no space for me to be weak.
Mm.
What I want to say is that there are lots of men who are just like you, and we have to seek them out. And we have to say, hey, let's sit down and have a conversation. Let's have a space to really go deeper. And there's all kinds of men's groups and opportunities for men to get out there that create real safe spaces for men to be
Mhm.
vulnerable, to be honest, to be surrounded by people that are experiencing the very same thing that they are. What I really want you to know is you're not alone. We're all going through this, no matter how successful you may think we look, or how, regardless of how amazing they look on their Instagram page or their YouTube page or whatever it is that they're putting out there. They're lonely too. Each and every one
Yeah.
of us are going through this. And so the first thing that I always want to say to men is, number one, focus on your diet, focus on your exercise, get good sleep, because if you can't do those three things, then nothing is going to work out in life. The acronym that I use with my clients a lot is HALT. Are you hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? If I
Mm.
can address those core things, then I can find myself to a much more stable emotional space.
Mhm.
And from that stable emotional space, so much more is going to be
Yeah.
able to come online. And then finding community. If I don't have it, reach out, because
Yeah.
the thing that I say to every man is that goes through our programs is, you're I want you to see through this work that every single man you come across on the street is probably going through the exact same thing that you are. They're
Yeah.
also wanting a connection. They're also struggling with their little boy, and their little boy wanting to be accepted. So if we can treat people uh, that we meet on the street every single day as
Mhm.
though they're just another man lost and looking for connection, and invite them into connection, then we create a completely different world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think exercise is so underrated, and I know people say that, like, "Oh, exercise," but it really is. It's funny with a lot of my male clients, I recommend the same thing. I'm like, "Well, where are you at? Are you at the gym? Are you working out? I don't care what workouts it is.
Yeah,
Running, just go move your body."
absolutely.
And it's incredible what it does to your mind and to your brain. And then from that place, yeah, it's like you said, you have that foundation. It's a lot easier to step into the other work. I think
Absolutely.
when you feel better about yourself too. I mean, exercise also gives you endorphins.
Mhm.
It does so much for you. And so I'm glad you said that, because I think it's so vital.
It's the gateway
um
drug, it's the gateway drug
it
to emotional development. Go go get some exercise, and you'll start
absolutely.
feeling better, and from there, you'll start making choices that go, "Oh, there's something else that I'm wanting, that I'm needing, and I can go and find it."
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kelly, this was such a great conversation. I so appreciate you coming on. We could talk about, I mean, we could literally go another hour. I've got more questions, but it
Um,
always goes by so fast.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was a really great
Yeah.
conversation, really great to talk to you. And thank you, really, from the bottom of my heart, for creating this conversation about men. And I'm so grateful to be able to speak to the male listeners as well as
Yeah.
the women out there, and really opening up their eyes to the
Yeah.
challenges that men are facing, because we are clearly in this together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why, I wanted to have this conversation. It was really more just an open-ended talk about what is going on, like what is happening internally for men. And just so that I think, one, for the men that listen, I have a pretty large male audience, and to know that they're not alone in what they're feeling. And I think for women to also understand a bit more about what's going on, because a lot of bad apples will make you feel like all men are the same, right?
Yeah,
And again, it doesn't excuse bad behavior, but I think I want more women to understand what men are actually really struggling with.
yeah.
um I think the female struggle is different. It's somewhat the same, but different.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think it's important for us to, I think, to bridge the gap between, I think there's this gender war that's going on in our society, and it's like men against women,
Hmm.
and it's like, oh man, we got to put a stop to that. How do we create bridges instead of the divide? How do we understand each other better? Um, I think that that'll go such a long way versus pointing fingers, blaming, um, and I think I also think for you made a really great point. I think men healing among other men is key. I think that's where a lot of the healing will happen. I really do believe that. I think therapy is great and all that, but I really do feel like for men, I actually think it's much more beneficial to be in a group of other men, not necessarily to go to therapy right away, right? I don't know. I have this deep feeling that like I think it's great and it's wonderful, but I think surrounding yourself with other really healthy men who are one healthy or going through the same thing as you're going through, and being able to have that, I think is where I would start. I think
Yeah.
that's so important and so vital. And there are so many communities. If you can't find them, maybe within your vicinity, there's a lot of online communities you can get connected to. So there's so many options out there, and I just want men to know that they're not alone. And that, yeah, I think there's healing possible. You don't have to live a life where you feel like you're never enough, or that you're, because some of the most amazing men that I know are the most vulnerable, you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
and so it's not a weakness, it's like such a strength, it's such a beautiful quality to have. And I think it'll only benefit your friendships, your romantic relationships, like all of that. Like, I think we have to face that fear and really dismantle the identities that were put on men, um, from our society, to really move ahead and to experience true healing.
Yeah. One last thing I'd say is, I think we create this idea of this perfect version of a man, perfect version of a woman,
Mhm.
and we're all killing ourselves trying to live up to
Yeah.
that version, and be careful what we ask for. I look at perfectly imperfect.
Mhm.
How can we find perfectly imperfect and be willing
Yep.
to accept that my partner is going to be perfectly imperfect in
Mhm.
exactly the ways that trigger the shit out of me?
Yep.
And this is the work that we get to do together. Uh,
Mhm.
and ultimately, the last thing I'd say is that you nailed it on the head when it comes down to community. I think in our digital landscape, in our world today, that is the biggest thing that we are
Mhm.
losing, and
Yeah.
is having such a tremendous, profound impact on our
Mhm.
social and emotional health. And
Yeah.
that's the thing that we have to continue to hunt after, that continue to go after.
Yeah.
I'll drop this for the men that are listening out there. One place that where I started out my journey is something called Mankind Project. It's in
Mm.
almost every city in the country. It's even global. They have a very easy, accessible beginner process to getting involved in men's work. Do go look it up. I recommend that as a starting place. And also, as I said, we run men's groups for high achieving men at Leaders Create Leaders, and there's lots and lots of other communities out there as well.
Amazing. Well, I'll drop resources in the show notes as well, so you can take a look at that. I'll definitely add that in there. Um, but thank you so much. Truly appreciate it. Glad we got to have this conversation. And I'll put contact information if anyone wants to get a hold of you as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Beatrice.